can't believe this, my eldest son Daniel muttered, his voice slicing through the silence of the lawyer's office. You're telling me the yacht goes to me and Michael gets the Santa Barbara property, but Claire gets nothing. Nothing at all. The room went deathly still. My fingers trembled as I clutched the armrest of my chair, the leather cool under my palm. I could hear the ocean faintly through the open balcony door, waves crashing against the pier outside the sound that had always calmed me. But not today. Today it sounded like judgment. Attorney Jonathan Pierce, gray-haired and slow-spoken, cleared his throat, Mrs. Evelyn Moore's last will and testament. He began again. His tone formal but uneasy, allocates her primary estate as follows to Daniel Moore, her eldest son, the 50-foot yacht Elysium, currently valued at approximately $1.6 million. To Michael Moore, her second son, the Santa Barbara vacation home and all associated furnishings appraised at about $2.3 million. Daniel exhaled loudly, smirking. Fair enough. Jonathan paused. To Claire Moore, her only daughter. He hesitated. I felt every eye in the room shift toward me, even though I wasn't the one speaking. Mrs. Moore has left no direct inheritance. The words fell like stones. Claire's breath caught. She didn't move. She just stared at the lawyer, her lips slightly parted, her eyes wide, then lowered her gaze, nodding slowly, almost as if she expected it. But the rest of them, Daniel, Michael, their wives, even the grandkids who'd tagged along for the celebration, burst out laughing. Daniel slapped his knee. Guess you finally learned what loyalty gets you, huh? Claire Michael chimed in. Mom always said you were too soft. Guess she meant broke, too. The laughter bounced off the marble walls, blending with the ticking of the grandfather clock behind me. Each second stretched like an accusation. I wanted to speak to stop them, but I didn't. Not yet. Jonathan looked uncomfortable. He shifted the papers on his desk. There's also a letter, he murmured, from Mrs. Moore addressed privately to Claire. Daniel rolled his eyes. A sympathy note. She can keep it. But Jonathan didn't move. Per Mrs. Moore's instructions, he said firmly, this letter is to be read only by the recipient, and he glanced at me only after the meeting concludes. Claire nodded silently. Michael crossed his arms, still smirking. You sure this isn't some last-minute rewrite? Because Mom wasn't exactly in her right mind near the end. That one stung. I looked at my son's men. I had raised men whose scraped knees I'd kissed when they were children, and I saw strangers. Daniel with his perfect suit and gold watch tapping his phone under the table. Michael, his jaw clenched, his wife whispering something smug in his ear. They were the image of success, at least on paper. But behind that I saw greed, pure, polished greed. Claire sat alone, hands folded in her lap. She didn't cry, didn't argue, just sat still in that quiet strength that reminded me of my late husband Robert. He had built our fortune from nothing, first in real estate, then in investments, finally with that yacht that bore his initials on the stern, EM, for Evelyn and Moore. The irony wasn't lost on me. After the reading ended, Daniel stood first. Well, he said, flashing that charming smile he used on clients, I guess that's that. Guess we'll have to start arranging for the transfer of titles and all that. He clapped Michael on the back. You me and that yacht, huh? Michael laughed. Yeah, we should throw a party. Invite everyone, well, everyone except Claire. Claire rose slowly, her chair scraping the floor. She didn't look at them. Congratulations, she said quietly. I hope you enjoy what you've earned. Daniel's wife snorted. Earned. Honey, you moved out 10 years ago and spent your time rescuing animals. Don't act like you were running the business. Claire gave a faint smile. You're right. I wasn't running the business. I was saving something far more important. And then she left, just like that. No tears, no pleading, no scene. Only silence followed her out the door, broken by Daniel's laugh echoing one last time. Guess Mom finally showed who the favorite really was. When the room emptied, Jonathan stayed behind with me. He looked at me carefully, as if waiting for some sign of regret. Mrs. Moore, he said softly, you're certain this was the arrangement you wanted? I smiled faintly, feeling the weight of 73 years pressing on my chest, and yet a strange calm settled over me. "Yes, Jonathan," I said. "Every word. Let them laugh." He hesitated. "The safe? Should I inform her?" "Not yet," I replied, looking out the window toward the ocean where Elysium gleamed under the California sun. "Let her find it on her own. She'll know what to do." And deep down, I knew the laughter wouldn't last long, because the will they just heard wasn't the only one I'd written. When people see a 73-year-old woman in a beige cardigan and pearl earrings, they don't imagine someone who once closed million-dollar real estate deals with a baby on her hip and a mortgage on her back. But that was me. I wasn't born rich. I built it brick by brick, sometimes literally, alongside my late husband, Robert. We met in 1976 at a gas station outside San Diego. He was covered in oil stains fixing an old Chevy that barely held together. I was a waitress at a diner serving coffee for 75 cents a cup. He told me, "One day, Eve, I'm going to buy you a house by the ocean." I laughed. We couldn't even afford rent. By 1984, we had 2 sons, Daniel and Michael, and a dream that refused to die. We started flipping small houses, scraping every dollar we had. Robert handled the repairs. I handled the clients. I wore thrift store suits and taught myself how to read contracts after the kids went to bed. We argued a lot, but we never quit. In 1991, we sold our first big property in Santa Barbara for $420,000. It felt like a miracle. We bought another, then another. By the time our daughter Claire was born in '95, we'd already built more investments. People started calling me Mrs. Moore of the coastline. It sounded glamorous, but behind that name were sleepless nights, unpaid bills, and 2 boys who thought their mother loved her phone more than bedtime stories. Maybe that's where it started the distance. Daniel was always ambitious, hungry for success. He learned how to charm investors before he even learned how to drive. Michael followed close behind, always competing, always wanting more. They idolized their father, strong, decisive, respected. And when Robert died suddenly of a stroke in 2007, I think they decided someone had to fill his shoes. They tried. They took over the business, rebranded, everything expanded into commercial properties. And for a while, I was proud. They were everything we'd worked for, our legacy in motion. Until I realized I was no longer part of it. Meetings happened without me. My office door stayed closed. One afternoon, Daniel walked in with a stack of papers and said, "Mom, you don't need to worry about the finances anymore. We'll handle it. Just enjoy retirement." Retirement. That word burned worse than any insult. I had spent 40 years earning every cent, and suddenly I was an accessory, a sentimental shareholder with no voice. They even stopped inviting me to the annual gala because, as Michael's wife whispered once, "You make the guests uncomfortable when you talk about old times." But Claire was different. While her brothers chased deals and yachts, she spent her 20s volunteering at animal shelters, running fundraisers, and living in a modest apartment in Monterey. I used to worry about her. "You could live in the Santa Barbara house if you want," I'd tell her. But she always shook her head. "That house isn't home, Mom. You are." She was my quiet pride, the child who never asked for anything and somehow deserved everything. When my health began to decline 2 years ago, Daniel and Michael swooped in like vultures, wrapped in silk. "You shouldn't be living alone," Daniel insisted. "Sell the yacht. Move into assisted living. We'll manage your accounts." I laughed at first, thinking it was concern. Then I saw the power of attorney paperwork hidden under the pamphlets for the nursing home. They wanted control. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window watching the moonlight shimmer across the marina. The Elysium rocked gently, her white hull gleaming. Robert's initials, EM, caught the light. Evelyn and Moore. Not Daniel, not Michael. I realized something that night. They saw me as a liability, not a legacy. So I began preparing quietly, methodically. I met with Jonathan Pierce, my lawyer of 30 years, and rewrote everything. I told him to make 2 wills. The first one would be the showpiece, the bait for greed. The second one, the real one, would be locked away in the safe only Claire knew how to open. Jonathan hesitated. "You're sure about this, Evelyn? You'll break your sons' hearts." I smiled sadly. If there's anything left to break. He asked why I wanted to do it this way. Why not confront them? I told him the truth because greed doesn't listen to reason, it only listens to loss. The months leading up to the will reading were the hardest. Daniel and Michael visited only when paperwork needed signing. They'd bring their wives who treated my home like a showroom. Once Daniel's wife pointed at my framed wedding photo and said, "We'll probably move that when we renovate." Renovate? As if I was already gone. But Claire visited every week. She brought flowers, groceries, sometimes just her quiet company. One Sunday afternoon, she asked Mom, "Why do you still keep the safe locked?" "I've never seen you open it," I smiled. "Because some things are worth protecting, darling. Not everything valuable shines." She nodded, thoughtful, never pushing further. She didn't know that inside that safe wasn't just money, it was truth. The real will. Letters. Documents showing how her brothers had been siphoning funds from the family accounts for years. Copies of transactions they thought I never noticed. I waited for the right time. And that time came today. When I saw their smug faces in that office, when I heard them laugh as my daughter sat in silence, I knew the lesson had begun. The first will was just the surface. The real inheritance wasn't gold or cash, it was justice. And soon, very soon, they'd find out how much greed can really cost. The night before the will, reading my house in Santa Barbara glowed like a postcard. String lights wrapped around the palm trees, the pool shimmered with reflections from the sunset, and Daniel's wife, Caroline, was barking orders at the catering staff like she owned the place. "Make sure the champagne's chilled," she snapped, clinking her diamond bracelet against the glass table. "Mother wants to celebrate her long life, right, Mother?" She always said it like it was a title, not a person. I stood by the patio door, clutching my glass of iced tea, pretending to enjoy the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. Daniel had decided this family dinner was necessary before the reading, a classy evening, he'd called it. But I knew better. This wasn't a celebration. It was a victory lap before the finish line. Michael strutted across the patio in his designer loafer's phone glued to his hand. "The lawyer confirmed tomorrow's time, right?" he asked, glancing at Daniel. "I'm not rescheduling my meeting with the investors." Daniel poured himself another glass of wine. "Relax, it won't take long. Mom already made her decisions. She knows who kept the business alive after Dad died." They laughed like I wasn't standing 3 feet away. Claire arrived a little late, carrying a small bouquet of lilies. She wore a plain blue dress, her hair tied back, no jewelry. She smiled softly at me, the only genuine smile of the night. "Hi, Mom," she said, hugging me. "You look beautiful." "Thank you, darling," I whispered. "You too." Caroline raised an eyebrow. "Oh, Claire, you didn't have to bring flowers. We have enough decoration." Claire smiled faintly. "They're for Mom, not the party." That silenced her for a moment, and I savored it. Dinner was served on the back patio, roasted chicken, Caesar salad, grilled salmon. My favorite meal, though, I could barely taste it. The air was thick with the scent of salt and wine, the low hum of ocean waves mixing with laughter that didn't feel real. Daniel raised his glass. "To family," he said smoothly, "to Dad's legacy, and to Mom, who taught us how to fight for what's ours." Everyone clinked glasses, everyone except Claire. She set her fork down. "What's yours?" she asked quietly. Daniel smirked. "What's ours?" he repeated, emphasizing the word. "You know what we built together. The Moore legacy." Claire tilted her head. "You mean what Mom and Dad built? You just expanded it." Michael chuckled. "Semantics. Look, we all played our parts. You did your charity thing, which is cute, but some of us kept the money flowing." The table went silent. Even Caroline looked uneasy for a second. "Michael," I said softly. "That's not fair." He shrugged. "It's true. Mom, you can't deny it. We've been handling the investments, paying property taxes, keeping the company afloat. Claire hasn't contributed in years." Claire's voice was steady, but her eyes shimmered. I didn't realize love was a transaction now. Daniel leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine. "It's not. But don't act surprised when reality hits you tomorrow. You've made your choices." I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. The cruelty in their tone wasn't new, it had been growing fed by years of entitlement. But something about hearing it in front of everyone, neighbors, friends, even my grandkids, felt unbearable. Mom said, Caroline sweetly turning to me, Daniel told me you might sell the yacht soon. It's such a burden to maintain at your age. You know you could just sign it over and we'll handle it for you. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Is that what he told you? I asked quietly. Caroline smiled, tilting her head like I was a confused child. Well, it makes sense, doesn't it? You don't use it anymore. Claire's jaw tightened. The yacht is hers, Caroline. You don't get to decide what she uses. Michael laughed. Oh, please, Claire. You think Mom even knows the last time she refueled it? We're saving her from drowning in paperwork. I looked at their faces, my own flesh and blood, and saw nothing familiar left in them. Just hunger. Claire stood abruptly, her chair scraping the patio tile. Enough, she said sharply. You're talking about her like she's already dead. The laughter stopped. Daniel frowned. Sit down, Claire. Don't make this dramatic. No, she said, her voice shaking. You've made it that way. Every time you talk about money or property or yachts, you forget what any of it was built for. Dad didn't want us to become this. Michael rolled his eyes. Oh, please, Dad was a businessman. He'd be proud we're still turning profits. He'd be disgusted, she snapped. Silence again. Only the waves filled the space between us. Daniel finally sighed, setting down his glass. You've always been emotional, Claire. That's why Mom never trusted you with the company. That's not true, I said, my voice breaking slightly. He looked at me, eyebrows raised. Isn't it? Every pair of eyes turned toward me. Even Claire. The patio lights flickered in the breeze, and I realized this was the last night they'd ever look at me the same way. I forced a smile, swallowing the bitterness burning in my throat. You're right, I said softly. I didn't trust her with the company. Daniel smirked, victorious. But I trusted her with something much more important. He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? I stood up my chair, scraping back. You'll find out tomorrow. Their laughter returned nervous this time. They thought I was bluffing, but when I looked at Claire, I saw her eyes searching mine, sensing something beneath my calm. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. The night ended with polite goodbyes and fake smiles. Daniel kissed my cheek like a businessman shaking hands after a deal. Michael promised to help me pack once I moved into a smaller house. But as I locked the doors behind them, the house fell silent except for the steady ticking of the clock on the mantel, marking the final hours before justice began. And somewhere in the darkness, the safe waited. It happened 3 weeks before the will reading, a warm Saturday morning, the kind of day that makes California look like paradise. I was sitting at the Harborview Diner, the one Robert and I used to visit every Sunday after church. The waitress, Nancy, knew me by name. Morning, Mrs. Moore, she said with her usual smile, placing my coffee down. Still black, no sugar. Still black, I smiled. I came there often out of habit, more than hunger. It reminded me of simpler times back when love meant shared pancakes and not signed documents. The bell over the door jingled, and before I even turned, I heard Daniel's voice. Loud, confident, the way he talked when he wanted everyone to know he'd arrived. Mom, he called, striding toward me with Michael close behind, both of them in crisp suits, expensive watches glinting under the diner's neon lights. They looked so out of place among the smell of bacon grease and coffee. I blinked. Daniel, Michael. What are you doing here? We need to talk, Daniel said, sliding into the booth across from me. Michael followed, snapping his fingers for the waitress. 2 lattes oat milk, he said, like this was his office. Nancy looked confused, but nodded. Daniel placed a folder on the table between us. We're worried about you, Mom. You've been making strange financial decisions lately, withdrawing money, refusing to sell assets. I'm not refusing, I said quietly. I'm deciding. He smiled thinly. You've already decided enough for a lifetime. I frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Michael leaned in, voice lower. It means it's time to stop pretending you can manage all this. You're 73. You shouldn't be running anything. You should be relaxing, maybe at Silver Oaks Retirement Community. They've got ocean views. The words hit like a slap. A nursing home, I whispered. Daniel sighed, exasperated. Mom, it's not a nursing home. It's independent living. You'll have help with your bills, your health, everything. We'll take care of everything. I looked at them, their perfect suits, their polished words, and felt my stomach twist. Take care of everything, I repeated. You mean take everything. A couple in the next booth turned to look. Michael leaned back annoyed. Don't start drama in public, Mom. I'm not the one who came here to humiliate her mother in a diner. I said, my voice trembling now. Daniel's smile faded. Humiliate. We're trying to protect you. Protect me from what I snapped. My own life. Nancy appeared with their lattes, her eyes darting nervously between us. Everything okay here? Just fine, Daniel said through clenched teeth. Family discussion. She hesitated, then walked away slowly. Michael pulled out his phone and tapped on the screen. Look, we've already talked to your attorney. I stiffened. You what? Daniel raised a hand. Relax. It's not what you think. We just wanted to make sure the paperwork was up to date. We can't risk mistakes in the estate. You went behind my back. The entire diner seemed to quiet down. Forks paused mid-air. Even the old man reading his newspaper looked over his glasses. Michael hissed, Mom, keep your voice down. Why I asked louder this time? You don't want people to know how eager you are to bury me alive before I'm even gone. A few heads turned. Daniel's face flushed. You're overreacting. Am I? I said, my hand trembling around my coffee cup. You think I don't see what's happening? The meetings without me, the missing funds, the way you treat my home like it's already yours. He opened his mouth, but I didn't let him speak. I gave you everything, every chance, every dollar. And this is how you repay me, by trying to put me in a home. The waitress froze behind the counter. A man in a flannel shirt whispered something to his wife. Daniel's jaw tightened. Enough. You're embarrassing yourself. No, I said, my voice breaking. You're embarrassing me. Michael slammed his latte down, splattering foam across the table. You're being ridiculous. We're just trying to protect what's left before you give it all away to your charity projects. Or to Claire, the moment her name left his lips, everything stopped. Daniel groaned. Oh God, not this again. You always defend her. The golden child. The failure with a bleeding heart. She's your sister, I whispered. She's a liability, he shot back. The anger in his tone made a baby cry 2 tables over. Nancy stepped forward, sir. Please lower your voice. Daniel stood up his chair, scraping loudly. You know what, Mom? Maybe you do belong in that home. You've lost touch with reality. You're letting Claire manipulate you, and it's pathetic. Daniel? No, he barked. You can't even handle paying your own electricity bills without asking for help. You're done. Admit it. The words hung there, cold and final. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just looked at him, the boy I once carried on my hip while painting the nursery walls, the child who used to bring me seashells after school, and I realized I didn't know him anymore. Nancy stepped forward again, placing her hand gently on my shoulder. Mrs. Moore, are you all right? I smiled weakly. I will be. Daniel rolled his eyes. Come on, Michael, we're done here. They left without paying. As the door jingled shut, the diner stayed silent for a long moment. Then Nancy whispered, Don't listen to them, sweetheart. Some kids forget who raised them. A man at the counter nodded. My son did the same when I retired. They think money makes them gods. I exhaled, my hands trembling so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Thank you, I murmured. Nancy smiled softly. You've still got fire in you. Don't let them take that too. I looked out the window as Daniel's car disappeared into the traffic. The ocean shimmered in the distance, calm and endless. I whispered to myself, let them laugh now. The tide always turns. A week after that humiliating scene at the diner, I woke up to the sound of knocking, hard, impatient knocking, the kind that doesn't wait for permission. When I opened the door, Daniel was standing there with a folder in one hand and a forced smile on his face. Behind him, Michael leaned against the porch railing, sunglasses on, scrolling his phone like he was bored already. Morning, Mom. Daniel said cheerfully, stepping inside without waiting. We need to talk about some updates. Updates, I asked, tightening my robe. About what? Your accounts, mostly. And the yacht, he replied. Oh, and the Santa Barbara property. We had to move quickly on a few things. I frowned. Move quickly. He handed me a piece of paper. Power of attorney. You signed it last month, remember? At the notary's office. It gives us temporary control of your financial assets for management purposes. I froze. I had gone to the notary's office. He'd told me it was for a document update related to the business taxes. He'd distracted me with talk about medical insurance. I hadn't realized. "You tricked me," I whispered. Daniel sighed as if speaking to a stubborn child. "No, Mom. We're protecting you. You're making emotional decisions. You almost donated $100,000, $1,000 to that stray animal shelter last month." Michael caught it before it went through. Michael chuckled. "You're welcome." "I don't need protection," I snapped. Daniel's tone hardened. "You do. You just don't know it yet." He placed more documents on the kitchen counter. Effective immediately, we're transferring the yacht into my name for insurance purposes. It's been uninsured for months, Mom. If anything happens, the liability could wipe you out. "That yacht was your father's," I said sharply. "You have no right." He cut me off. "Dad's gone, Mom. Someone has to handle the real world." I stared at him, unable to breathe for a moment. The same boy who used to fall asleep on that yacht's deck, wrapped in his father's old coat, now looked at me like I was an obstacle. Michael finally spoke up. "We're also putting the Santa Barbara property under my management. Investors want to rent it out for events. You'll get a cut, of course." I laughed, but it came out broken. "A cut of my own house." Michael shrugged. "It's business." Something inside me cracked. I could feel it like a glass splitting under pressure. "Get out," I whispered. Daniel didn't move. "Mom, get out." He glanced at Michael, then back at me. "You're not thinking clearly. You've been under a lot of stress. Maybe you should stay somewhere else for a while. We'll handle things until you're ready." "Stay somewhere else," I repeated. "Just until after the will reading," he said casually. So everything's calm and legal." Legal. That word again. I realized then this wasn't protection. It was possession. They'd already claimed me like another property asset. My knees weakened. I gripped the counter for support. "You're taking everything I said." "No," Daniel replied softly. "We're taking care of everything." They left soon after leaving the documents scattered across the marble countertop, symbols of betrayal dressed as paperwork. That night, I walked through the house Robert and I built 40 years ago. The hall smelled faintly of his cologne. The family portraits lined the staircase, each one a ghost. In the living room, I saw the photo of our first house, the one we flipped in 1984. I touched the frame, my reflection warping in the glass. Back then, we didn't even have air conditioning. We shared one fan, one dream, and 3 kids who slept on mattresses on the floor. And now 2 of them wanted to put me in a retirement home. I sat in Robert's old recliner, the leather cracked and warm under my fingers. The clock ticked loudly. Maybe this was my fault. I'd raised them to win, to survive, to want more. I'd forgotten to teach them when to stop. When Claire arrived the next morning, she found me sitting in the same chair, still holding the papers. "Mom," she said softly, "what happened?" I didn't answer at first. I just handed her the documents. She read them quickly, her eyes widening with every line. They did what I nodded. They've taken control of everything. The accounts, the house, the yacht, everything except what they don't know about. What don't they know about? I hesitated. "The safe." She frowned. "The one in your study?" "Yes," I said. "The one your father built into the wall." Her voice dropped. "What's inside?" I smiled faintly. "Answers." She looked confused but didn't press further. "Mom, you can fight this. I'll get you a lawyer." "I already have one," I said. "Jonathan Pierce. He knows what to do. But for now, let them think they've won." She sat beside me, gripping my hand. "You don't deserve this." "Deserve," I whispered. "Claire life doesn't give us what we deserve. It gives us what we're willing to take back." We sat in silence for a long time, the morning light spilling through the blinds. I could see the worry in her eyes, the fury she tried to hide. "Don't hate your brothers," I said finally. "Hate makes you blind. Pity them instead. They're drowning in greed and they don't even know it." That evening, I received an email from Daniel's office confirming the temporary relocation of my personal belongings. They were moving my things into a smaller apartment complex for convenience. Convenience. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Then I walked into the study. The safe was hidden behind Robert's framed blueprint of our first house. I ran my fingers along the edge until I found the latch, pressed it, and the steel door clicked open. Inside were the documents Jonathan and I had prepared, the real will proof of unauthorized transfers and one sealed envelope marked with Claire's name. I locked it again, heart pounding. That was the moment I stopped being their victim. If they wanted a war for my fortune, I'd give them one, just not the kind they expected. Because the money they stole would one day bring them to their knees. And when the truth came out, they'd learn what power really looks like. That night, I couldn't sleep. The ocean outside my window whispered like an old friend, the waves hitting the pier in slow, tired breaths. I sat by the window in Robert's old cardigan, the one that still smelled faintly of cedar and sea salt, and stared at the moonlight crawling across the living room floor. 73 years of life, and I'd never felt so small and yet so awake. It's strange how silence can be louder than any argument. After Daniel and Michael stripped away everything, there was nothing left to distract me. No meetings, no phone calls, no staff, just me, the house and the echoes of a life I'd built piece by piece. My reflection stared back from the glass, wrinkles, deepened hair, silver eyes that had seen both empires rise and marriages crumble. I thought of Robert, the way he'd laugh whenever I doubted myself. "You're stronger than any storm eve," he used to say, handing me a cup of black coffee before another long day. Remember that. But back then, I didn't feel strong. I just felt tired. I walked through the house barefoot, the floorboards creaking beneath me. Every step took me through memories. The kitchen where I'd burned our first Thanksgiving turkey in 1981. The hallway where I'd hung the kids' report cards, each A, circled in red marker. The back porch where Robert and I used to slow dance under string lights after everyone went to bed. Now those same lights were gone. Daniel's wife had them removed, saying they looked dated. I stopped at the photo wall by the staircase. Dozens of frames. My children's lives frozen in time. Daniel, age 6, holding a toy boat. Michael grinning with chocolate all over his face. Claire sitting on Robert's shoulders, both laughing under the California sun. I touched the glass over Claire's picture, tracing her smile. She had Robert's eyes, soft, observant, full of quiet resolve. She reminded me of myself when I was young. Back then, we didn't have money or luxury. I worked 12-hour shifts at a diner while Robert painted houses by day and studied business law at night. We shared one car, one dream, and an unshakable belief that someday we'd have a life that felt safe. We never wanted millions. We just wanted enough. But once enough arrived, my sons wanted more. That was the real tragedy, not the greed, but the forgetting. They forgot the hunger that once made us human. I poured myself a glass of water, my hands trembling slightly. It was almost midnight when I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, Claire stood there, wrapped in a sweatshirt, her hair messy, eyes red. "Mom," she said quietly, "I couldn't sleep. I was thinking about what they did. I just needed to see you." I stepped aside. "Come in, sweetheart." She sat on the couch, hugging her knees like a little girl. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Regret what?" "Building all this," she gestured around the house. "The business, the money, everything that made them like this." The question cut deep. I sat beside her. Every brick in this house was built with love, not greed. What they've become, that's not our fault. It's what happens when people forget where they came from. She nodded slowly, biting her lip. "Sometimes I wish Dad were here. He'd know what to say." I smiled faintly. He'd probably yell at them first. She laughed, a small, soft sound that filled the empty room. "Yeah, then he'd hug you and say everything's going to be okay." I felt my throat tighten. He always believed in okay, even when we were sleeping on the floor. We sat there for a while in silence, the ticking clock filling the spaces between us. Then Claire said something I'll never forget. "Mom," she whispered, "you don't have to be strong all the time." I turned to her. "If I stop being strong, who will be?" Her eyes glistened. Me. The air in the room changed, then heavier, but warmer somehow. I reached for her hand, and for the first time in a long while, I felt peace. She was my anchor, the one soul in this family untouched by greed. And that was when I knew I couldn't let her walk through life thinking kindness was weakness. She deserved to know that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers and waits. After she left that night, I returned to the study. I opened Robert's old desk drawer, the one that stuck slightly on the left side, and pulled out a worn notebook. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, plans, account numbers, property lists. Everything we'd built. At the bottom of one page, Robert had scribbled something years ago: "If anything happens to me, trust Evelyn. She sees the world clearer than I ever will." I smiled through tears. "You always did have too much faith in me," I murmured. But maybe this time I needed to have a little faith in myself. I closed the notebook and placed it inside the safe next to the real will and the sealed envelope. Then I added one more thing, a flash drive with copies of every financial record I'd found over the past 6 months. Every unauthorized transfer, every lie. I wasn't sure how the endgame would play out yet, but I knew this: when you take everything from a woman who's built her life from nothing, she doesn't crumble. She recalculates. That's what Robert would have done. And that's what I was going to do. As I turned off the light and walked back toward my bedroom, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the hallway mirror. For a brief second, I didn't see an old woman anymore. I saw a survivor, one who'd been underestimated for far too long, the kind of woman who didn't shout when wronged. She waited, and when the time came, she struck precisely where it hurt most. The night was quiet again, but this time the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like preparation. The following week, the house felt different, quieter, almost like it was holding its breath. Daniel hadn't called since his visit, and Michael only sent one curt message: "We've transferred your things to the apartment downtown. It's better this way." Better for whom, I wondered. Claire came by to help me pack, even though she didn't believe I should go anywhere. She moved carefully through the rooms, her eyes scanning every corner as if trying to memorize the house itself. "Do you ever think about leaving?" she asked softly, folding one of Robert's old sweaters. "I think about it," I said. "But then I remember how much of my life is built into these walls. Every tile, every photo, every nail has a story. Leaving would feel like erasing it." She smiled faintly. "That's exactly what they want, a clean slate." I nodded. "But some things don't wash away that easily." She looked up at me, then something flickered in her eyes. She was beginning to suspect there was more I wasn't saying. We packed in silence for a while, the sound of the waves faint through the open window. Claire paused when she reached the study door. "Mom," she said, "you still keep that safe locked." I froze for a heartbeat, then smiled. "Always. What's inside?" "Just papers," I said lightly. "Things that matter to me." She tilted her head, unconvinced. "You've been acting strange lately. Calm, almost too calm. You're not the type to let them walk all over you." "So what's going on?" Her words hit closer than she knew. I sat down slowly on Robert's old chair. "Claire, sometimes the best way to win a war is to let the enemy think they've already won." She blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means patience," I said. "It means not everything lost is gone forever." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded silently. That evening, she offered to help clean out the study while I rested. I agreed. I needed her to stay close to that room, close enough for the truth to start whispering. As she dusted the bookshelf, one of the framed blueprints, Robert's old house design, tilted forward slightly. Claire reached up to fix it, but the frame felt heavier than it should have. When she pressed her hand along the edge, she felt a small metallic indentation behind it. A click, and then a hollow sound. She frowned, pulling the frame gently away from the wall, and froze. Behind it, embedded in the drywall, was the outline of a hidden safe. For a moment, she just stared at it. Then she called out, "Mom." I didn't answer. I'd been expecting this. She turned toward me, eyes wide. There's a safe here. Why didn't you ever tell me?" I smiled faintly. "Because not everything is meant to be opened right away." Her hands trembled slightly. "Is it about them? About Daniel and Michael?" I didn't answer directly. "Do you remember what your father always said?" I asked softly. She frowned. "That money doesn't change people, it just reveals who they really are." I nodded. "Exactly." She looked back at the safe, her mind racing. "Mom, what's inside could change everything, couldn't it?" I met her eyes. "Yes, but timing is everything. If you open it too soon, they'll destroy what's inside before it can protect you. Protect me, she repeated. The slip was deliberate. Her brow furrowed, realization dawning slowly. Mom, this isn't about you anymore, is it? I reached for her hand. Claire, one day soon you'll understand. But for now, promise me don't touch that safe until I tell you. She hesitated, torn between trust and curiosity. I promise, she whispered. That night, after she went home, I stood in front of the safe for a long time. I ran my hand along the cold metal door. Inside, the real will waited along with the documents proving Daniel and Michael's deceit, and the envelope marked, "To Claire, when it's time." I knew she would find it eventually. She was her father's daughter, curious, patient, brave. But the timing wasn't right yet, not until they'd shown the world who they truly were. 2 days later, the first crack in their facade appeared. I received a call from Jonathan Pierce, my lawyer. His voice was tight. Evelyn, I just got word. Daniel and Michael have requested early access to your estate portfolio. They're using the power of attorney to start liquidating assets. My blood ran cold. Liquidating, yes. They're planning to sell the Santa Barbara property within the week. I've stalled the paperwork, but they're being aggressive. I closed my eyes. Let them. He hesitated. Evelyn, you can't mean that. I do, I said. Every move they make now tightens the noose they don't know they're wearing. When the time comes, I want there to be no doubt who they've become. Jonathan was silent for a moment. You've always been a strategist. No, I said quietly. I'm just a mother who finally learned how to play their game. That night, Claire texted me again. Mom, are you okay? I've been thinking about the safe. I smiled at the screen, my heart aching with love and fear all at once. Patience, darling, I typed back. Everything has its time. Outside, thunder rolled in from the coast, a rare storm sweeping across the California shore. I watched the rain streak down the windows, feeling the weight of what was coming. They thought they'd taken everything from me, but they hadn't realized what I'd left behind, not just money, but proof. And proof in the right hands is far more dangerous than any fortune. After the storm that night, the air in Santa Barbara turned sharp and clean. The morning sunlight glittered across the ocean like broken glass. To anyone passing by, it looked peaceful. But peace, I'd learned, was just the pause before a storm hit again. Daniel and Michael thought I was finished. They'd stripped my name from every board, taken over every account, and forced me into a quiet corner of my own life. I let them. Because every empire eventually collapses from the inside, especially when its rulers believe they're invincible. The first thing I did was call Jonathan Pierce. Jonathan, I said softly, it's time. He didn't ask what I meant. He just exhaled slowly. You're sure you want to go through with this? Yes, I said. Let them dig their own graves. I just need to make sure the world sees what they've done. Jonathan had been with our family for 30 years. He'd watched Robert and me build everything from the ground up, had seen our kids grow from innocent boys to polished predators. He'd also been smart enough to help me create what I called the safety net, a set of documents and digital trails that no one but Claire and I knew existed. I'll start compiling the transfers, he said. You have proof of every unauthorized withdrawal, everyone. I replied. They thought I was too old to understand online banking. He chuckled quietly. They underestimated you. They always have. That afternoon, I went to the bank. Not the one Daniel used for the business mine. The private one where Robert and I had opened an account decades ago under a small trust named Silver Harbor Investments. The clerk, a woman in her 30s with kind eyes, greeted me warmly. Good morning, Mrs. Moore. I see you're here to check on the trust. Yes, I said. I'd like to make sure it's still intact. She nodded, typing quickly. It's untouched, ma'am. Balance $2.4 million. $2.4 million. Money my sons didn't know existed. I smiled politely. Excellent. Please prepare the beneficiary update documents for me. I'll be changing a few details soon. Her eyes widened slightly. Of course, ma'am. Would you like to name the new beneficiary now? Not yet, I said, but keep this between us. When I walked out of the bank, the California wind tugged at my hair. For the first time in months, I felt steady. That night, I invited Claire over for dinner. Just the two of us. She arrived with takeout Thai food and her laptop. You didn't have to cook, Mom, she said, laughing. I figured you'd be tired. I smiled. I'm tired, but not defeated. She gave me that look again, suspicion wrapped in love. You're planning something. Maybe I said. Tell me about your week instead, she sighed. Michael called me. He said I should stop meddling and let the adults handle the estate. I hung up on him. Good girl, I said. She laughed, but it was bitter. They're out of control, Mom. It's like they've lost all sense of shame. I took a slow sip of tea. No, darling, they're showing who they've always been. People don't change pressure, just exposes them. Her brows furrowed. And what are you going to do? I looked at her and said quietly, wait. The following days were quiet. Too quiet. Daniel stopped by once with his wife Caroline, all smiles and fake warmth. Mom, we just wanted to check in, she said, her voice honey-sweet. We're redecorating your study at the downtown apartment. You'll love it, clean, minimalist, modern. I smiled faintly. Did you bring my safe too? Daniel froze for half a second. Your safe? Yes, I said. The one behind the blueprint. Surely you didn't forget that. His expression flickered a quick flash of confusion, maybe guilt, before he forced a laugh. Right, of course. We'll have someone move it later. Good, I said. It holds my life's work. Caroline smiled awkwardly. You mean like photos and mementos? I looked her straight in the eye. No, I mean work. The silence that followed was delicious. After they left, I called Jonathan again. They're planning to open the safe, I said. Then it's time we let them think it's the only one, he replied. He helped me arrange a decoy, an identical safe empty, except for old tax records and a few meaningless letters. The real one remained hidden behind Robert's blueprint, sealed under a secondary lock that only I and Claire knew existed. For the next week, I played the role they expected, the frail, fading mother. I let Daniel's wife fuss over my medications, let Michael handle financial reports, let them all believe I'd given up. At night, though, I was anything but weak. I reviewed bank statements, matched signatures, recorded every inconsistency. I created a folder labeled, For Jonathan, Final. Inside were scanned copies of every theft, every forged document, every lie. One evening, while reviewing papers, I found something that almost made me laugh. A notarized form dated just 3 weeks ago, declaring me mentally unfit to manage personal assets, signed by both Daniel and Michael. They'd filed it with the county court. Quietly, they were trying to declare me incompetent. I leaned back in my chair and let the irony wash over me. The woman who built their fortune from scratch was now being written off as unfit. Fine, I thought. Let them believe it. It'll make the ending that much sweeter. Before going to bed, I wrote a short note and slipped it into the safe beside the real will. It read, To my sons. You were right, I am old. But don't confuse old with weak. You taught me the value of power. Now I'll teach you the cost of greed. I sealed it, closed the safe, and turned off the light. Outside, the ocean wind rattled the windows, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again. The storm hadn't passed. It was circling back, and this time it had my name written all over it. The invitation came 3 days later. Family meeting, mandatory attendance. That's all the email said. No greeting, no love, just command. It came from Daniel's office account. I almost laughed when I saw it. The word family had never sounded so corporate. The meeting was set for Sunday afternoon at the Santa Barbara property, the same one Robert and I had bought with our first real profit, the one where I taught the kids how to swim, how to grill burgers, how to dream big. Now it would be the place they'd try to bury me. When I arrived, the gates were already open. Daniel's car, sleek and black, sat beside Michael's silver Tesla. There were 2 SUVs parked behind them lawyers. That told me everything I needed to know. Caroline greeted me at the door, her lipstick too bright, her smile too tight. Mrs. Moore. You look wonderful, she chirped. I smiled politely. You always say that before bad news. Her smile faltered. Inside the living room looked nothing like I remembered. The family photos were gone, replaced by abstract art and sterile decor. My husband's fishing trophies had been boxed up, my favorite painting stored away. It was no longer home, it was an asset. Daniel stood by the fireplace, hands in his pockets. Michael sat on the sofa flipping through a stack of papers. Both of them looked up when I entered. "Mom," Daniel said smoothly, "glad you could make it." I nodded. I wouldn't miss a business meeting about my own life. His jaw tightened slightly, but he gestured for me to sit. We wanted to go over a few updates before next week's will reading. Caroline poured herself a glass of white wine and perched beside him like a decorative accessory. "It's all just a formality, Mrs. Moore. We want to make sure you're comfortable, comfortable," I repeated. "That's one word for it." Daniel clasped his hands together. "As you know, managing the estate has become complicated. Taxes, insurance, maintenance. It's a lot to handle at your age. So to simplify things, we've decided to consolidate ownership under one trust, run by me and Michael, of course. You'll still receive an allowance for living expenses." "An allowance," I said, softly. "Yes," Michael added, "it's for your benefit. Everything will be handled efficiently. We've already drafted the documents." He slid a folder across the table toward me. I didn't touch it. "And what does this trust include?" I asked. Daniel leaned back, his tone casual. "Everything. The yacht, the Santa Barbara property, the Palm Springs apartment, the investment accounts. It'll all be managed together. In other words," I said quietly, "I own nothing." He smiled like a man explaining math to a child. "Not nothing, Mom. You'll have security. That's better than ownership." I looked between them, my sons, the children I'd nursed through fevers fed on canned soup, when times were hard taught, to tie their shoes and chase their dreams, and realized there wasn't a shred of love left in the room. Only control. Caroline crossed her legs. "You'll need to sign before Tuesday, otherwise the lawyers will proceed with the court filing declaring you mentally unfit. We've already started that process, just in case." Michael smirked. "Standard precaution." I stayed still. Not a word, not even a breath too loud. Daniel sighed, mistaking my silence for surrender. "Mom, this doesn't have to be difficult. We're giving you a dignified way out. No drama, no embarrassment." I smiled faintly. "And in return, he said we keep the legacy alive." "Whose legacy?" I asked, softly. He blinked. "What?" "Whose legacy? Daniel, your father's, mine, or yours?" The question hung in the air like smoke. No one answered. Claire arrived 10 minutes later. I hadn't told her about the meeting Daniel had. Her eyes darted around the room, already sensing tension. "What's going on?" she asked cautiously. Daniel turned to her. "Just business, Claire. Stay out of it." She crossed her arms. "It's Mom's estate. I have every right to be here." Michael scoffed. "You gave up your share years ago when you quit the company." She shot back. "I didn't give it up. I walked away from your greed." Daniel's voice sharpened. "Enough. This isn't about you." She turned to me, pleading. "Mom, what is this?" I met her eyes and smiled calmly. "A lesson, darling." Her brows knitted. "What kind of lesson?" "The kind people never forget," I said. Daniel shoved the papers closer to me. "Just sign them, please. Let's make this easy." I picked up the pen and turned the page slowly, pretending to read, though I'd already memorized every line from the copies Jonathan had emailed me secretly. The terms were clear: total transfer of control, permanent removal of authority, all assets under Moore Family Holdings, a name that excluded mine entirely. "Do you trust me?" Mom Daniel asked. I looked up at him, meeting his confident, practiced smile. "Of course I do," I said sweetly. "Just as much as you trust me." He didn't catch the irony. He never did. I took the pen, signed the first page deliberately, and stopped halfway through the second. "Oh dear," I murmured. "Is this the version your lawyer prepared?" "Yes," Daniel said. "Why?" "Because I said, folding my hands, Jonathan told me he'd send the finalized version to me directly, with my amendments." He froze. "What amendments?" "The ones you never bothered to read," I said softly. "Don't worry, you'll see them soon enough." For the first time, Daniel looked uncertain. Claire glanced between us. "Mom, what did you do?" "Nothing," I said, smiling faintly. "Yet." Michael groaned. "Oh, God, she's playing games again." I rose from my chair slowly. "No, Michael, I stopped playing games the day your father died. Since then, I've just been keeping score." Caroline shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Moore, you're making this harder than it needs to be. I looked straight at her. You're right, but some lessons need to hurt. Then I turned to leave. Daniel called after me, his voice tight. You'll regret this, Mom. I paused at the doorway. Maybe, but not as much as you will. The silence that followed was so heavy it seemed to pull the air out of the room. Claire followed me outside. Mom, she whispered, what's happening? I looked at her, my eyes sharp but calm. The truth is happening, just not yet. As we walked toward the car, I glanced back at the house where it all began, the house they thought they owned. And for the first time in months, I smiled, not out of anger, but certainty. They just handed me exactly what I needed, their signatures, their arrogance, and their downfall. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of sunlight that looked too clean for what was about to happen. The ocean was calm, the seagulls loud, and yet there was a heaviness in the air that I could feel in my bones. The will reading was scheduled for 11 o'clock at Pierce & Associates downtown. I dressed carefully, cream suit, pearls, hair neatly pinned. I wanted to look every inch the fragile, retired woman they thought I was, the woman who'd finally been conquered. When I arrived, Daniel and Michael were already there, standing near the window with Jonathan, their lawyer. Caroline sat primly beside them, scrolling through her phone like she was bored of the whole affair. Claire sat in the corner, quiet, tense, her eyes never leaving me. Mother Daniel greeted smoothly, "You look lovely." "Thank you," I said. "Funerals bring out the best in people." He frowned. "This isn't a funeral." I smiled faintly. "That depends on your point of view." Jonathan cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" He opened the thick envelope on his desk and pulled out a set of papers. "This is the last will and testament of Mrs. Evelyn Grace Moore executed under California law." Daniel leaned back, confident. Michael crossed his arms, smirking. Jonathan began reading, his voice slow and deliberate. "To my eldest son, Daniel Moore, I leave the yacht Elysium and all related assets. To my second son, Michael Moore, I leave the Santa Barbara property, including its furnishings and art collection. To my daughter, Claire Moore—" He paused. Claire straightened. "I leave no direct inheritance." Silence. Then Daniel laughed loud, cruel, triumphant. "Guess the rumors were true, huh? Guess compassion doesn't pay, after all." Michael snorted. "Well, at least she'll save on taxes." Claire's lips parted, but no words came. She just looked at me. There was hurt in her eyes, yes, but also something else. Understanding. I didn't look away. Jonathan continued. Mrs. Moore also left a sealed letter addressed to her daughter to be read privately. He handed it to her, a simple white envelope, my handwriting neat and steady. Claire hesitated, fingers trembling. "Can I open it now?" Jonathan nodded. She unfolded the letter carefully. For a moment, she didn't move. Then her eyes began to widen. Daniel frowned. "What's that?" Claire looked up slowly. "Mom." "This isn't," Jonathan cleared his throat. "There's more," he said quietly. Mrs. Moore also requested that before any asset transfers are finalized, one final verification be performed by the family together. Daniel groaned. Verification of what Jonathan opened his briefcase and placed a small black box on the table. A key rested inside. "This," he said, "is the key to Mrs. Moore's personal safe. She specified that it be given to her daughter and only her daughter after the initial will reading." Caroline laughed nervously. "A safe." "What full of jewelry?" Jonathan shook his head. She described it as the truth. The room went very still. Claire stood clutching the key. Her eyes met mine. "The safe. In your study," I nodded once. "Yes, the one your brothers thought was empty." Daniel's smile faltered. What Claire turned to Jonathan. "Can we open it now?" He nodded. Mrs. Moore instructed that it be done immediately with all beneficiaries present. The color drained from Daniel's face. "This is ridiculous. We already have the will. Then you have nothing to fear," I said quietly. Within half an hour, we were back at my house. The lawyer, my children, their spouses, all crammed into the study that had once been Robert's sanctuary. The sound of the waves outside was the only thing steady, as Claire knelt before the wall, lifted the blueprint, and revealed the safe. Her hand shook as she inserted the key and turned it. The door opened with a low, metallic groan. Inside lay a stack of folders, sealed envelopes, and one flash drive labeled Silver Harbor Trust. Jonathan took them out carefully, placing them on the desk. He opened the first folder and began to read. The documents detailed everything: wire transfers from company accounts into Daniel and Michael's, personal holdings, falsified authorizations, unauthorized withdrawals from the family trust. Dates, amount, signatures. Michael's voice cracked first. This is fake. Jonathan shook his head. Every page is notarized, every transaction verified by the bank. Daniel lunged forward, grabbing the folder. "You set us up," he shouted. I met his fury with calm. "No, Daniel, you set yourselves up. I just made sure you left a trail." Caroline paled. "You mean—" "Yes," I said softly. "I knew about every dollar you stole, every lie you told, every plan you made to take my name off the company I built." Michael's voice was shaking now. "You can't prove—" Jonathan handed him another paper. "This is the updated will, the real one, executed and recorded under the Silver Harbor Trust." Daniel's face went white. Jonathan unfolded the document and began reading, "To my sons, Daniel and Michael Moore, I leave my love and my hope that someday they rediscover their humanity. No financial assets or property will be transferred to them until such time as they demonstrate moral integrity and restitution for past actions. To my daughter, Claire Moore, I leave full control of the Silver Harbor Trust, including all liquid assets, real estate holdings, and business interests associated with Moore Investments." He paused, looking at them. "That totals approximately $7.8 million in assets." The room exploded. Daniel shouted, "You can't do this!" Michael slammed his fist on the desk. "We'll contest it." Jonathan adjusted his glasses calmly. "You can try, but all prior transfers and manipulations are documented here. I suspect the authorities will find that very interesting." Claire turned toward me, tears glistening. "Mom, you knew they'd do this." "I did," I said, softly. "That's why I let them." Daniel's voice rose again, desperate now. "You wanted to humiliate us?" "No," I said, my tone calm, almost gentle. "I wanted to teach you. You thought power came from taking, but real power comes from knowing when to let go." For a long moment, no one spoke. The waves outside crashed harder now, wind rattling the windows. Michael looked at Jonathan. "This isn't over." Jonathan smiled faintly. "You're right, it's just beginning for the courts." Caroline stood, her face pale. "Let's go." Daniel turned toward me, eyes full of rage and disbelief. "You planned this for months." "Years," I corrected. "Ever since the first time you tried to take something that wasn't yours." He clenched his fists. "You'll regret this." I shook my head. "No, Daniel, you will, because the one thing I left you can't be bought or sold." He frowned. "And what's that?" I looked at Claire, who was still standing by the open safe, her hands trembling around the key. "A sister who still loves you, though I don't know for how long." The room fell silent. They left without another word. Claire turned to me, her voice breaking. "Mom, how did you know this would all work?" I smiled. "Because greed is predictable. Love isn't." The lawyer began packing the papers, the sound of folders closing like punctuation marks on a long, painful sentence. When everyone was gone, I sat by the window watching the Elysium glimmer under the fading sun. For the first time in years, the ocean didn't look like judgment anymore. It looked like peace. It took less than 2 weeks for everything to unravel. Daniel and Michael had built their empire on charm and confidence. But when you remove trust, all that's left is paperwork. And paperwork never lies. The first crack came from the bank. Jonathan's team filed a formal inquiry into the unauthorized transfers listed in the documents Claire had retrieved from the safe. Within 48 hours, the accounts of Moore Investments were frozen. Daniel called me that night. His voice was shaking, not with anger this time, but fear. "Mom, you have to fix this," he said. "They're investigating me and Michael. You know this isn't what Dad would have wanted." I let the silence hang long enough for him to hear his own words. "No, Daniel," I said softly. "It's exactly what he would have wanted, the truth." He exhaled sharply. "You're destroying the family." No, I said, my tone calm. You did that when you chose greed over decency. He muttered something under his breath and hung up. The next morning, reporters were outside the Santa Barbara property. Someone had leaked the story. Maybe a clerk, maybe a rival. Headlines read, "Moore Brothers under investigation for financial misconduct. Mother's will exposes hidden transfers." By noon, it was on every local channel. Caroline called Claire crying. "He's losing everything. They're freezing our assets, our cars, the yacht." "The yacht was never yours," Claire said quietly, and hung up. Meanwhile, Michael tried a different approach. He came to my house, no appointment, no warning. I found him standing on the porch in the same suit he'd worn to the will reading, though it looked less expensive, now rumpled and desperate. "Mom," he began. I didn't know what Daniel was doing. He handled most of the money, I swear. I just followed his lead. I looked at him, the same boy who used to collect seashells for me after every beach trip, now a man begging for absolution. "You signed every document I said. You looked me in the eye and told me it was for my own good." He swallowed hard. "Please, Mom, I'm going to lose everything." I hesitated for a long moment. Then I said quietly but firmly, "Maybe that's the only way you'll understand what everything really means." He turned away, his shoulders slumped. "Claire's loving this, isn't she?" "No," I said. "She's grieving the brothers she used to know." He didn't reply. When he left, I watched him walk down the path, the Pacific wind tugging at his jacket. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, just pity. 2 days later, I was summoned for a meeting with the Financial Review Board. They wanted clarification on my role in the estate and the trust. Jonathan went with me, of course. The boardroom was sterile and cold, full of men in gray suits. One of them, a younger man with kind eyes, asked Mrs. Moore, "When did you first realize your sons were acting without authorization?" I met his gaze steadily. "The day they asked me to stop being their mother and start being their client." There was a pause, then someone at the table whispered, "That's going in the record." By the end of the week, all of Daniel and Michael's accounts had been seized, pending investigation. Their investors pulled out. Contracts were canceled. The Yacht Elysium was reclaimed under the Silver Harbor Trust, which meant it was legally mine again. Claire and I stood on the dock the morning it was returned. The sun was rising, painting the sky gold. She turned to me, smiling. "You really named it right, didn't you, Elysium?" "Paradise." I nodded. "Your father believed paradise wasn't a place. It was peace of mind." She laughed softly. "You finally have both." We spent that afternoon sailing along the coast. For the first time in years, I felt light, like I could breathe without waiting for the next betrayal. Claire took the wheel while I sat back the wind, tangling my hair salt in the air, sunlight dancing across the water. But peace, I realized, wasn't the absence of pain. It was the presence of clarity. The following week, the court issued its verdict. Daniel and Michael were found liable for financial misconduct and breach of fiduciary duty. They weren't imprisoned. I hadn't pressed criminal charges, but the civil penalties were enough to strip them of everything they'd stolen. When the judge asked if I had any statement, I stood and said, "Your Honor, I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for truth. My sons forgot who built their foundation. This isn't punishment, it's balance." The judge nodded solemnly. "Then balance is restored, Mrs. Moore." After the hearing, reporters crowded outside the courthouse. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. "Mrs. Moore, how does it feel to see justice served?" one asked. I smiled politely. "Justice doesn't feel good or bad. It just feels right." Claire linked her arm with mine as we walked through the crowd. "You were incredible," she whispered. I squeezed her hand. "No, darling, we were." That night I sat by the fireplace, the same place Daniel once called me, out of touch. The same room Michael had laughed in when he thought I was powerless. Now the silence felt earned. Claire came in with 2 mugs of coffee. "Jonathan called," she said. "He finished transferring the remaining assets into the trust." "Everything's officially under my name," I smiled. "Your name suits it better now." She sat beside me quiet for a long while. Then she said, "You could have taken everything back, Mom. Why give it all to me?" I looked into her eyes, Robert's eyes. "Because I built this fortune for my children. I just forgot which ones deserved it." She blinked away tears. "I'll take care of it, Mom. I'll make sure it helps people, not hurts them. I know you will, I whispered. Outside, the wind rustled the palm trees. Somewhere far away, the tide shifted a sound I'd come to recognize as life moving on. Daniel and Michael eventually moved out of California. Word was they'd started over somewhere inland, selling cheap properties, trying to rebuild what greed had destroyed. I wished them peace from a distance. As for me, I didn't need mansions or yachts or millions to feel rich. I had what mattered: a clear heart, a loyal daughter, and a life lived on my own terms. For the first time in decades, I slept through the night without dreaming of loss, because justice had already come. Quietly, beautifully. I didn't chase it. I became it. It's strange, isn't it? How silence, once unbearable, can become the sweetest sound in the world. The house feels different now. Not empty, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm passes when you realize the walls are still standing. The photos are back where they belong. The curtains smell of salt and sunlight, and the old grandfather clock ticks like a heartbeat that refused to stop. I sit in the same armchair Robert used to love the leather worn smooth from years of living. Claire is in the kitchen humming while she makes coffee. It's early morning, the light soft and golden pouring through the window, like forgiveness. I think about everything that's happened, the betrayal, the humiliation, the laughter that once burned like acid, and I realize something simple, something true. You can't control how people love you, but you can control how their cruelty shapes you. For a long time, I thought strength meant fighting back, yelling louder, proving my worth. But now I know real strength is quieter. It waits, it plans, it forgives without forgetting. The world called me old, fragile, useless. They forgot that time doesn't weaken you, it sharpens you. Age teaches you how to read between words, how to see truth in silence, how to fight wars without raising your voice. And when you've lost everything, once you stop fearing the idea of losing anything again, Claire comes in 2 mugs in hand. Here, she says, setting one beside me. Still black, no sugar. I smile. You remember? She grins. You're the one who taught me that sweetness should be earned. We sit together, watching the waves beyond the glass. The Elysium glides quietly along the horizon, its white sails bright against the blue. Do you ever think about them? She asks. Every day, I say, but not with anger. She nods slowly. I think they thought they were doing the right thing for themselves, at least. Maybe they did, I say. Greed has a way of dressing itself up as logic. People convince themselves they're being practical when they're just being afraid. Claire leans her head on my shoulder. You could have destroyed them completely. You didn't. I didn't need to, I whisper. Losing everything they stole was punishment enough. You can't humiliate someone more than the truth already does. She looks at me for a long moment. Mom, do you forgive them? I think about it. Really think. Then I nod. Yes. Not because they deserve it, but because I do. Forgiveness is freedom, and I've lived too long to die in a cage built by bitterness. She smiles, her eyes wet. You're something else, you know, that I'm just old, I tease. No, she says softly. You're wise. We sit there for a while the way we used to when she was little. No words, no rush, just the steady rhythm of life finding its way back. Later that afternoon, I walk down to the beach alone. The tide is low, the sand cool beneath my feet. The wind carries the faint scent of salt and jasmine. I can almost hear Robert's voice in the breeze. You're stronger than any storm, Eve. I close my eyes and whisper, You were right, my love. But I had to learn it the hard way. At the edge of the shore, I kneel and write in the sand with my finger, Respect is richer than gold. Then I watch as the waves slowly erase the words, not as a loss, but as a reminder. Some lessons don't need to be seen to last. That evening, I record a message on my old camcorder. It's something I've been meaning to do for a while, not for lawyers or banks this time, but for whoever comes after me. The red light blinks and I start to speak. My name is Evelyn Moore. I'm 73 years old, and I've lived long enough to know what money can buy and what it can't. It can buy houses, yachts, and silence, but it can't buy respect, love, or peace of mind. Those things have to be earned. I pause. smiling faintly at the camera. If you're watching this someday, maybe you're my grandchild, or maybe you're just someone looking for answers. All I can tell you is this: never measure your worth by what people take from you. Measure it by what you refuse to lose: your kindness, your dignity, your truth. The clock ticks behind me as I continue, and when life humbles you, as it always will, don't fight to prove who you are. Let time do that for you, because time has a way of revealing everything. I reach forward and stop the recording. Then I look around my home, my real home, and realize it's exactly as it should be. Not perfect, not grand, but honest. Claire joins me later for dinner. She talks about expanding the Silver Harbor Trust into a foundation for women who've been financially exploited by their families. We could call it the Evelyn Fund, she says. I laugh. Oh, please don't. I don't want my name on a building. I want it on your heart. She wipes a tear from her cheek. It already is. That night, as I lie in bed, the ocean hums softly outside. The stars stretch endless across the California sky. I think of Robert, of Claire, even of Daniel and Michael, all of them. Pieces of the same story, a story that finally found its ending. Maybe I wasn't meant to leave behind a perfect family. Maybe I was meant to leave behind a lesson, and it's this: don't underestimate quiet people. They're the ones who remember, they're the ones who endure, and when the time comes, they're the ones who rise. The world may call me old, but I know better. I'm eternal not because of my wealth, but because of what I refused to let it change. Evelyn Moore's voice fades with the sound of waves. Her story ends not with revenge, but with peace, and that perhaps is the richest inheritance of all.